Good morning. Thanks, Lacey. Thanks for joining us this morning for the latest installment in the virtual access series from the Downtown Seattle Association. My name is Felix Bonnell, and today we're spending time with three members of the most recently elected and appointed cohort of the Seattle City Council who were sworn into office earlier this year. Now, I love Seattle. I spent a lot of my time steeping in Seattle history. City councils of the distant and recent past have given historians much to study, and they give us some lessons that might be applied to decisions we face in the present and the future. For instance, back in 1924, Council President and future Mayor Bertha Landis was Mayor pro tem because Mayor Edwin J. Doc Brown had gone to New York for the Democratic Convention. While Mayor Brown was gone, Councilmember Landis exercised her temporary mayoral powers and fired the chief of police. Of course, Mayor Brown reinstated him upon his return to the city. And who can forget that time in the summer of 1941 when four Seattle City Council members hid out at the old Big Four Lodge in the Cascades. You might have seen the foundations for the old lodge in the parking lot for the trail to Big Four ice caves. Their aim in hiding out was to deny Mayor Milliken, Mayor Earl Milliken, confirmation of his unpopular nominee for police chief. Anyone else see sort of a public safety theme emerging here? And then more recently, it's hard to overstate the 1967 election of a slate of candidates aligned with a group called CHECK, that stood for Choose an Effective City Council. People like Phyllis Lamphere, Tim Hill, and Sam Smith. That ultimately led to city charter reform and the modern strong mayor system we have in Seattle now, and the approval of a long overdue open housing ordinance after decades of redlining and other discriminatory practices. The lesson for me is that city council members have power to shape the city we live in. And with this in mind, let's introduce our panelists for this morning. Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth represents District 3 on the Seattle City Council, which includes neighborhoods that border the downtown core to the east, Capitol Hill and First Hill. Prior to being elected, the Seattle native helped manage and grow Hollingsworth Farms, a family-owned and operated cannabis farm on the Olympic Peninsula. Also joining us, Councilmember Maritza Rivera. She represents District 4 on the Seattle City Council, which is located northeast of downtown, includes Wallingford, the U District, and Ravenna, among others. Before being elected to council, Councilmember Rivera served as Mayor Harrell's Deputy Director in the Department of Arts and Culture. And our third panelist is Councilmember Tanya Wu. She's one of two citywide council representatives. She's serving in position 8 through November of 2024. Councilmember Wu is a Seattle native and the co-owner of the Louisa Hotel in the Chinatown International District and a longtime neighborhood community advocate. And now, before we get to our panel discussion, I'd like to invite Jared Axelrod. He's a Senior Manager of Public Policy for our sponsor of the series of programs, Amazon.
Great. Thank you, Felix. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jared Axelrod with Amazon. Amazon is proud to partner with DSA as the presenting sponsor for these conversations focused on issues impacting downtown's revitalization. This is the second of 3 DSA virtual access events for the spring series, and this morning's topic is one that has been, I think, rather popular among downtown residents, workers, business communities, maybe around the occasional dinner party or cocktail after work, the new Seattle City Council. So I'm excited to have 3 of our new members of the Seattle City Council joining us today, Council members Joy Hollingsworth, Maritza Rivera, and Tanya Wu. Now, as part of my work with the DSA, I co-chair DSA's policy committee, so I had an opportunity to get to know each of these amazing women on the campaign trail last year. And I heard, just as I think you'll hear today, their passion for service to their communities, their commitment to public service and back to basics governing, and their optimism for the future of Seattle. We are now more than 100 days into their terms, and I think we could all agree that the tenor at City Hall has dramatically improved. A willingness to engage the business community has been another welcome development, as has the need to harness public-private partnerships. It is critical for downtown's continued revitalization. We know DSA members are eager to learn more about how these new council members view downtown and their plans for the heart of our city and its broader impact across every neighborhood of Seattle. So I'm excited to get into the discussion. I'll hand it back over to Felix to kick off the discussion. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
And thanks, Jared Axelrod, and thanks to Amazon for supporting the series of programs through DSA. Now, we have some questions we prepared in advance, and we'll get to audience questions as often as we can throughout the program. Use the Q&A or the chat function there in Zoom to be able to type your questions in. I can't guarantee that we'll get to all of them or that we'll get to them quickly. I'll try and weave those into whatever part of the conversation we're having, but please don't hesitate in typing out questions. It really helps the program move along. And we love this, the notion of these as more of a conversation than just a presentation. So please engage. Now, let's see, before we begin these virtual access conversations, we always start with a few data points. Now, from DSA's Downtown Revitalization Dashboard, which is a great resource. If you haven't already bookmarked it on your browser, you should. They note that downtown Seattle's return of workers has now reached 12 straight months of 50% or higher compared to the same month pre-pandemic. And for April, that's the most recent month for which there are complete figures, daily average worker count was more than 87,000 people. That number is the second highest daily average since the start of the pandemic. Our next data point, through the first 3 months of 2024, incidents of violent crime and property crime downtown have fallen by nearly 15% compared to the same period last year. Our third data point, Seattle Police Department response times for Priority 1 calls citywide in the first quarter of 2024 averaged 10.8 minutes. That's up from 9.9 minutes in the first quarter of 2023. A couple more here. Quarter of the way through the season, the Seattle Mariners stand atop the American League West with a record of 24-20, and that's all I'm going to say about that at this point. We're only about a quarter of the way through the season, as I said. And then finally, I don't have exact figures, but I know that more than 70,000 concertgoers attended Lumen Field last night for the Rolling Stones. Boy, talk about Seattle history. I think that's their, I don't know what number, but they've been appearing in the city since the 1960s, since before the Czech slate changed the city charter and everything. Their Rolling Stone history in Seattle goes way back. All right. Now on to our conversation. Now, you might remember at DSA State of Downtown a few months ago that she said that 2024, Council President Sarah Nelson said 2024 is the year of downtown for this legislative body. And we have a bunch of questions. First one I want to talk about is, Jared alluded to this a little bit in his opening remarks. Last year, in the run-up to the election, there was a lot of talk about dysfunction at City Hall and the City Council not being able to pass needed legislation and do just basic business. And so that seemed to drive a lot of the voters in that election cycle last year, this notion of dysfunction. Have we moved past that era? Did it change instantly overnight when the new council was sworn in January, or are we still dealing with cleaning up from the previous several years? Who wants to take a whack at that question first in terms of where are we in terms of getting past that most recent dysfunctional era?
I think it's an exciting time to be at City Council right now. We are all in person 5 days a week. We continuously collaborate. We visit each other's offices. We chat. We talk about our ideas and about all the things that are happening in the city. And so it's an amazing time. I feel like we are seeing the unintentional consequences of a lot of legislation that has passed previously. And so taking a look at those and figure out how we can mitigate those effects moving forward.
I agree with Councilmember Wu. I think, Felix, it was really great because it was a unique election year in that there were a lot of open seats. And so many of us met before we started working together. And we forged friendships, what I call friendships. And it was really great to come in and knowing folks already and having had a working relationship prior to coming in. And so it feels really great. And even for our colleagues who we maybe had not met on the campaign trail, it was a pretty seamless transition into the role in terms of building the working relationships. So I feel really fortunate, and I've been around the block a few times at the city of Seattle. So I feel really lucky to be on the second floor with this set of colleagues. We are all very committed to working together on behalf of the people of Seattle. There is no doubt in my mind that everyone comes to the job every day in person with that in mind. And so I would just add that to what Councilmember Wu said. And I agree with her in terms of, there was some legislation passed that we are now trying to right size, which is always challenging because it takes time. Even when you do identify what needs to be right sized, it still takes time to actually do that work. But we are committed and we're engaged in doing that work. And if you listen to council committee that airs on this, you can watch all our committee meetings on the Seattle channel. You will see that we are working together to strive to right size what needs to be right sized so that we can get downtown and all our districts back on track post-pandemic.
Councilmember Hollingsworth?
Yeah, just echoing what Councilmember Wu and Councilmember Rivera has said. I think the beautiful thing about this council, besides being in the office every day, is how much you can get work done by just walking to someone's office and talking to them about amendment. Or did you hear about this in the news? And it's funny that we're talking about, hey, how much you can get done in person. But I think that is one of the best things that we have enjoyed about working with each other. The second thing I will say is that most of the people on council, we're not here to fight. We're also not here to blast our other council members on social media. I would never want one of my council members to read about something I said about them in the paper. I'm very relational, and I think a lot of people agree with that. We talk about things together to make sure that some values are aligned, but sometimes we're going to have fundamental differences, and that's okay. And I think that's the beauty of it, that we can agree to disagree.
So quick question that I want to ask, fold in one of the audience questions here. So all the dysfunction of the previous era, it wasn't sort of baked in. That's not been, it didn't pollute the institution. The institution has moved on, is what you're saying. Or have we set the bar very low for what function looks like now based on the previous era?
Well, I think this is a new council, and we've seen, most of us grew up here, and we've seen what's been happening these last couple of years, and we're compelled to run. And so I think going forward, we have a lot of exciting things happening: the comprehensive plan, the transportation levy, how do we revitalize downtown, looking at World Cup, FIFA soccer in the next couple of years. So a lot of amazing and exciting things happening that we're planning for.
And this question from the audience was about back to work. You said you guys are there 5 days a week. Can we expect, and the question is, thank you for your commitment for doing public service in public. Can we expect city employees to follow your lead and return to office 3 days a week or more anytime soon?
Well, I mean, I can say that Council President on the legislative side has issued, everyone on the second floor will be back in person no less than 4 days a week, starting a date in June. I apologize that I can't remember the date in June. And then in terms of I've talked to DSA about this in the past. I feel very strongly that all of the city workers need to come back. I would love to see 5 days a week, but certainly no less than 4 in short order. I can't do that, but means the city council can't legislate that. We are not the boss of the city workers, the mayor is. But I am talking to the mayor's office about, how do we get city workers back in person? This is something I'm really passionate about, particularly in terms of dealing with the impacts of public safety downtown. We know that when we have boots on the ground, things are safer. There's more activity. Small businesses don't need to close because there are folks that can come and shop and eat in their establishments. And so without, we have 10,000 city workers, and some of them have been working in person throughout the pandemic. All the blue collar workers, the construction workers, the bus drivers, they've all been working in person, and it's the office workers that have been working remotely. And it's time to get office workers back in person downtown. I know the DSA has done a great job on the north end of downtown, but on the south end of downtown and into Pioneer Square, we're really struggling. So I really think that bringing back workers is important, and is something I am working my best to try to effectuate as much as possible from where I sit.
And Councilmember Hollingsworth, you mentioned this a moment ago about just the value of being there in person, face to face, in terms of the improving relationships with your colleagues there on the city council. Is there a way does that translate to the departments as well?
Yeah, I think the first thing, Felix, is we're trying to lead by example. So us being the council people being in here 5 days a week shows like, hey, we're in here, we need city departments, like, hey, can I run over? Can I meet with you? Can I talk to you? Like, are you in the office? It's not putting pressure on folks, but it's kind of just leading by example. The second thing is the legislative department, like Councilmember Rivera said, with having council president issuing, return to office 4 days a week. I also want to recognize that, it's a different era as well. And so I think we'll always be in this hybrid model. I think what we're going to have to do is figure out how we're going to stagger it to make sure that downtown is consistently active. If you're driving in on Monday, you barely hit any traffic. And then also sometimes on Fridays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, that's when sometimes most people come into the office. I would like us to stagger it so we have consistent flow of people coming into downtown, whether it's our private industries or it's our public government as well.
And then in terms of the, you mentioned this being back in the office and how that relates to public safety. You mentioned that, Maritza. Let's talk about public safety for a moment here, because you said that's this return to offices is part of that. But before I get to that, one thing, I think you mentioned this, Councilmember Hollingsworth, this notion of it's a different era. And some people have come to rely on, this is kind of adapting an audience question here. People have come to rely on the flexible schedule to take care of children and elderly. Is this going to be codified at some point, or how do we address the things that are holding some people back from returning to office?
Yeah, I think, Felix, it's a number of things. Look, people that have, when you walk and you see construction workers, they have a sticker that says dirty hands, clean money, right? Like a lot of the construction workers, they're downtown. A lot of our parks department, they're the ones that clean up. They can't work from home. And our bus drivers, all the people that are doing a lot of the hands-on type of stuff, the trades, they can't work from home. And like Councilmember Rivera said, they're in the office. But I will recognize that there have been a lot of people that have that flexibility because childcare is incredibly expensive. And so sometimes they're able to take care of their children. They're able to take care of their aging parents. And a lot of people live outside the city because housing is incredibly expensive for Seattle. So you have long commutes of people coming in and out. I think what's important is that we recognize that and we can understand that there's going to be a hybrid model for people to work. I don't think it's going to be 5 days a week. I know that we're in here 5 days a week. That's what it's going to take to really, push the city forward. But I think for other folks, I think a hybrid model is fine.
Okay. And then in terms of public safety, let's talk about public safety here, because that's a big issue for everyone. People who live in downtown, work in downtown, people who are perceiving downtown from a distance and rarely or never setting foot downtown. What's the good news about public safety you can share this morning in terms of progress that's been made recently?
I mean, on public safety, I will say we just passed legislation to address recruitment and retaining of officers. And so we're trying to address, it takes a long time to review applications. And in the interim, sometimes what happens is we lose officers to other cities because the process is so long, the application process in general. When they take exams, how often they can take an exam if they are not successful the first time around. So we're trying to address those things to shorten the application process without sacrificing quality, because of course quality is important for the accountability purposes. So, but we are trying to address that. And so, we did pass that. And I think that I'm hopeful that that will be helpful. In addition, most of us are building relationships with the precincts that service our districts. I know that Councilmember Wu, who's citywide, and she can talk about it more. So Councilmember Wu, don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I've heard you say you visited with a lot of the precincts. So we're building relationships with SPD. I know I meet with Chief Diaz monthly. I meet with the Captain Lori Agard, who services the North Precinct. She's the captain of the North Precinct, the head there. And so I meet with her regularly. So, we're building relationships. We're trying to effectuate the application process to get more officers hired quickly, because we know our staffing numbers are still very low. And it really impedes our ability to address not just priority one calls, but all the other crimes that are happening in the city. To my point that I made earlier, these things aren't going to happen overnight. It's going to take time to undo what was done by the prior folks that were here at City Hall. And I try not to, I'm a person who I'm taking the problem today and moving forward. So I don't want to dwell too much on the past, but only to say that it does take time to unravel. And so we really appreciate folks sticking with us and understanding that we're not going to be able to solve for these problems overnight, but we are taking steps. And yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, and I did want to address, because I in my zeal, I do want to bring workers back full time. You know, some of these, I understand we're living in a new world, and in this way, I'm a little bit dated because of my age, but you know, I know that we have the ability to work hybrid, but to Council Member Hollingsworth's point about working together, being in person, I believe the work gets done better when you're in person, because you have the ability to work with your colleagues in a way you can't from behind a screen. And also when you're not on the screen, you're just with no one. I mean, you know, without your colleagues. So I just think as much as possible, I think it's helpful to support folks and what they need to be able to come in person. But I do feel that being in person really will help address some of these public safety issues, particularly downtown, not so much in the neighborhoods, because if people are working from home, they're already in the neighborhoods. But downtown is the economic driver of any city. And it's just, we need to do our part to revitalize by ensuring we have our workers in person who are able to, like I said earlier, be able to, you know, when we had more boots on the ground walking around, and help the economic revitalization with the supporting of small businesses. Yeah. So I think all of that is really helpful to public safety.
Yeah, all these issues are so interconnected. I mean, we could, you know, it's like this, like a different blood vessels going into a heart or something. In terms of that public safety component and this notion of perception of within the city and outside the city, do enough people in Seattle or people outside of Seattle, whether in the suburbs or whether thinking about moving here or visiting here, do enough people see Seattle as being a place where they're safe?
Councilmember Wu, were you gonna go in?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You guys are too polite. I don't like how you guys just. I like this. We're in a new
That'd be
era.
nice.
I love this. One thing before I go forward, I should mention that Councilmember Kettle was invited to be part of this. He couldn't attend because of a scheduling conflict. I should have mentioned that right up front, and I apologize. But anyway, Councilmember Hollingsworth, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no worries. I think I had mentioned this before, that being safe and feeling safe are two different things. And what we have done at council is try to reset the tone.
We'll talk about that. Talk about that, being safe versus feeling safe. I don't know if everyone, we talked about that in our little prep meeting. I want to hear you kind of explain that for our audience too.
Yeah, there's some people that don't feel safe. So that could be, well, Joy, the lighting in this area, the trash, you know, the graffiti, your environment, that plays a lot into sometimes people feeling safe, you know, like safety of it. Being safe is, okay, is the response times low? You know, is there, you know, if you called 911, is someone going to show up, right? Like, you know, being able to have that safety net. And there's a difference there. And I think the issue that we have seen is that public safety, and we have tried to reset this, is that public safety should be a nonpartisan issue. Like, it should just, but there's no progressive way, there's no centrist way, there's no conservative way. Just public safety is nonpartisan, right? We should all deserve to feel safe. Everybody in every different neighborhood, safety looks a lot different. But I think we've tried to change that tone on it being a nonpartisan issue. It's not either or. It's you know, it's fluid. It's different in different situations. I think the other thing is that we have to address is that it doesn't matter how many officers we have, if we cannot book people for and hold people accountable for certain activities and crime that's going on in our city, then we're just going to be having officers that are just babysitting and just being, you know, deterring stuff. And that's kind of an issue. We have to hold ourselves accountable to some degree. No one is talking about criminalizing poverty, but we're talking about people that are particularly taking advantage and doing harm to different businesses, smash and grabs, violent shootings, activity, robberies, stabbings. I mean, these are things where people have to be held accountable for. And so I think that's the difference that we see with, you have an officer that might arrest someone for a crime and then they get released within an hour. And then that just shows that person there's no accountability and they can continue this process of, okay, well, I can do this or I can do that.
So wait, is that a matter of budget? Is that a matter of legislation? Is that a matter of policy? Where's that decision happening that you're talking about right there?
That's the council working with Attorney Ann Davidson in ensuring that some of the legislative laws, from a misdemeanor to a felony, understanding the criminality, the back end of the criminality piece. So right now, your front porch is your police, it's your fire, it's your social workers, your EMT. A lot of people miss out about the judges. They miss out about our attorney, our city attorney. And then also the county jail, so it's like there's a whole back end piece to this puzzle instead of just what people see on the front end.
And in terms of that perception of that, obviously anyone attending this meeting today cares about downtown Seattle, cares about this issue, thinks about this issue, like first and foremost around public safety. I work for a radio station. We have a lot of crime stories on our news in the morning. I watch some local TV. There's a lot of crime stories. And as you were intimating a second ago, it's a very complex issue with all sorts of jurisdictions and different policy decisions that aren't legislated or decisions that are driven by budget. Who's telling that story? Who's telling that complex story almost as an antidote to the more kind of, if it bleeds, it leads kind of crime stuff that seems to be pervading the local media at times? It seems like it's a battle between the perception and reality, and the perception seems to drive a lot of decisions people make about how much time they spend in downtown. That was a question. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Where's the counter narrative emerging from? How do we tell that story? The kinds of stuff we're talking about here. How do we tell that story more effectively?
And I think we could tell it through different means, through arts and culture. How do we leverage our arts and culture committee in downtown? How do we help uplift our organizations, our theaters, our museums, to bring people back? And some of us did a tour with Friends of the Waterfront and learn about their plan on how they are planning to connect to the waterfront of downtown, Pike Place Market, Chinatown National District, Seattle Center, and to allow for that flow of people to come in. We're at the start of cruise season. And, I hear you when you say people come up and tell us, we see in the news, national news that Seattle's not safe, but when we come here, it's not what the perception is in the media. And so how do we, like you said, tell that story? It took us a while to get to where we're at right now. And I think many of us, we're 100 days in, we're still trying to understand what's happening. Many of us have done ride-alongs in several precincts. We've walked to the Blade, 3rd Pike and Pine, with neighbors and residents and business owners, 12th and Jackson and CID. And so we're trying to understand the issue and then trying to talk to people closest to what's happening to come up with solutions together. And that's just going to take time, like talking with officers, like what's the biggest obstacle, and that's being able to hold people accountable, or talking to small businesses having to deal with vandalism, break-ins. Fentanyl is especially rough, and I believe King County just did their homelessness count, and we're at the highest numbers ever. And so there's a lot of issues that have kind of percolated over time. And so I think we're trying to understand the issue and trying to come up with solutions with community, and really lean in, especially with the downtown association, with the businesses and residents. I just did a tour last night with Third Avenue Partners. They live next to the Winter Garden Theater, and talked about how much they love living in the middle of downtown, how much they love arts and culture, but how demoralizing all the vandalism is, the boarded up storefronts. And we'll love to see the revitalization of downtown include and see storefronts sustainable for art organizations. And so we got a lot of amazing ideas, and we'll love to see how we can move forward with that.
So yeah, in terms of that downtown revitalization, and how obviously activating spaces, whether it's through temporary events or whether it's storefronts that are vacant, having businesses in them, or more people being back downtown, working 5 days a week out of the office or in the office, all that stuff is tied together. And we talked a little bit about this in our prep meeting, Councilmember Hollingsworth, this notion of a lot of potential that you see in downtown for activating the space in a way that is really focused on a particular demographic. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you were talking about when we met the other day?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, we talked about. You were talking about. I remember saying. The thing I most remember saying. We don't need a Chili's in downtown Seattle. Not to target Chili's as a restaurant, but you had some really specific. And you're a lifetime Seattleite. You talked about being with your grandma, going across the parking bridge to the old Bon Marché and stuff.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a lot of potential to activate Seattle in a way that maybe we're not. And obviously choosing the priorities are really hard because there's so many things we could do. There's only so much time and so much resources. But
Right.
what do you see as priorities for revitalizing downtown the way you think it should be revitalized?
One of the things that we do really, really well. Thank you for reminding me. Sorry.
I love that comment about Chili's. It made me chuckle yesterday. So anyway.
Chili's. Yeah. And my grandma's right behind me. So
Oh.
she'd be mad if I didn't mention this. Okay. So the one thing that we do really, really well is we do a great job of the tourist piece. We have our waterfront. We have a beautiful Climate Pledge Arena. We have a phenomenal convention center. There's different pockets of downtown where tourists come and they're amazed. Seattle Center is phenomenal. The way that Director Marshall keeps that campus meticulously clean, it's safe. It just feels really, really good. We do a great job. The one thing that we have to figure out is how we get people that live in our region in Seattle create that magic of downtown again. As a little kid, if I got a good grade, my grandma would jam-pack me in her champagne Cadillac. We'd go downtown to the Bon Marché, and then we'd have lunch at Nordstrom's, right? And it was like this nostalgic, it was this beautiful, magical experience. We're going downtown. We get to go see what's happening. We're going downtown. It was this amazing thing. Even though I'd lived 15 minutes away from it, it was this cool thing, right? We have to figure out how we're going to create that magic again for downtown. And a lot of that is going to be where people can live downtown, they work downtown, they come to restaurants downtown. We have activation with arts and culture. It's going to have to change, especially for half of the city's age is 35-year-olds. We're millennials, where they want to come to something. And we joked about it. You said Chili's, I said Applebee's. It's not going to be that type of environment anymore, those traditional downtown places where people used to come. It's going to have to be some type of event, some type of activation, some type of cool art, culture, walk or whatever it is. And I mentioned that there were times where we used to laugh at Vancouver, BC, because everyone used to reverse commute because they had a ton of housing downtown and people would reverse commute to work and all this stuff. And come to find out, they were pandemic proof. You go to Vancouver at any point in time, you will see restaurants, you will see people living, you'll see hustle and bustle. You will just see this amazing activation of downtown. And that's the one thing that I think we can be able to do here in Seattle with the DAP plan. But that's, of course, going to take it to be safe. We're going to have to make it livable for folks with housing. We're going to have grocery stores, storefronts, things where people feel like they don't have to leave downtown to be able to get things.
Now, if some of these seemingly intractable issues around public safety were addressed significantly or eliminated entirely, which maybe that's fantasy, would that mean all that sort of stuff would naturally just happen? I mean, is it best to focus the resources on the things the city can enforce and then to help inspire the kind of stuff you're talking about? Or is it a combination of enforcement as well as specialized programs to either subsidize or encourage investment in things like what you're talking about? Because it seems like there's no limit to the things that are required to get all this stuff done, yesterday.
Right.
I think people are still, even in this new era, this new, more cooperative era, I think you only have a certain amount of time till people feel like there's got to be significant progress. And I think there's been progress. I don't know if I would call it significant yet. So how do you prioritize and how do you make all these things happen? And I have quite questions about parking enforcement being part of crime reduction. And you mentioned this yesterday around, I guess let's answer that question. I have a related question I'll ask in a minute, but how do we prioritize what we're talking about?
Is this for me or can my colleague jump in?
Anyone could jump in. I'm just curious because
I will say this really quick. I think it has to be coincide. I think it has to be at the same time. I think we're smarter as humans where we can't wait until public safety, we would just be waiting for a long time. There are going to be some issues that we're going to have, but I think they have to go side by side. I will say that, and then I'll pass it off to Councilmember Rivera because I think I'm talking too much.
You are not talking too much. Joy, thanks for being inclusive though. That's what I love about my colleagues. So we all want to make sure we're giving each other equal time. So I can't underscore how happy I am to come to work every day and work with these amazing individuals. I will say, I agree with Joy. I mean, it's a little bit chicken or egg, right? Like you do have to address both because one helps the other. I want to say something about the perception versus reality because, the reality is, and I love that DSA tracks all this information, is super helpful to know the status of downtown, literally. And one thing though, I wonder is, I know things are going unreported and I don't know whether I know that has an impact on crime statistics. So for instance, I've been telling folks, certainly in my district and anyone I talk to, do report if your crime, even if it's something where, I talk to a lot of small businesses. There are a lot of small businesses in the D4, and I say, if you got broken into, you showed up and your shop got broken into, it's not happening at the moment. If you call 911, they're not going to come because there aren't enough officers and it's not priority one because the person's no longer there. Do report it because it is important for us to have accurate crime statistics as we are working toward addressing public safety. And that goes toward perception, right? So if we don't have accurate data, it will impact perception. So I think I think perception versus reality depends on who you speak with and their experience. I ride the light rail almost every day to come to work back and forth. And I see a lot of incidents or a lot of things that would, I've been in Seattle 23 years, but I grew up in the inner city in New York City riding the subways. Not a lot phases me, but I can see how other people might feel. And I hear from my constituents, like, I don't feel safe riding the light rail, even though there are less incidents than most cities that have public transportation. So there's the perception thing, but the reality is, if you are riding the train and you see one thing that makes you feel unsafe, that is your experience. So it's really tricky. So I'll say that, and I'm an optimist, so I mean to say it as I'm not trying to be pessimistic about it. I just want to be real about what is happening. And I struggle with the perception versus what the reality is. And just know that many of us are talking to our partners at Sound Transit at King County Metro to deal with how do we make public transit safer so people will ride. You've seen probably in the Seattle Transportation Plan, there's some proposed investments toward public safety on buses and light rail because we want to make sure people feel safe so they will come to downtown. But we absolutely need to do both. We need to address public safety so people will come downtown. And we also need to make investments to make sure that we are making this energetic, special downtown, to Joy's point, that people want to come to. And I don't feel that's unique to Seattle downtown. That's every downtown. If you're a kid that didn't grow up downtown, most people don't, because most downtowns are traditionally have been more commercial. But I remember growing up in the inner city in New York, in the Bronx, and like getting to go to Manhattan was like, whoa, mind blowing. And to Joy, say similarly to Joy, it wasn't that far away, but it felt like a foreign country, to be honest, because as a low income kid, like that was such a treat. And so we need to make that downtown here, that for people all over the city, make it special, make it a place where kids, families will come and kids later in life will have the same experience that Joy and I had growing up. And we need to be able to make investments. To Councilmember Wu's point about the storefronts and empty storefronts, how do we help do our part as city government to help work with the business community and DSA to make sure that we're making investments that will help, create this revitalized downtown, because it helps all of us. I mean, you know, revenue comes from the businesses that are downtown. And so we really want to do our part to make sure that folks are coming downtown and participating in all that downtown has to offer. And we have a new waterfront that is going to be so amazing. Once it's completed, it already looks amazing, and it's just going to look even better. And we do need to address the public safety issues so people will come and enjoy those amenities. So we need to do both. I'm long-winded. I'm Puerto Rican. I can keep talking.
And we'll come back around
I
to
know
this.
my colleagues also want to weigh in here.
Yeah, but before we talk to Councilmember Wu, I have an audience question that I think relates in a way to this notion of what the city can do to sort of either grease the wheel or change some policy level stuff or invest resources to make things easier for some of these changes to happen. This comes from an audience member. Public safety is number one, of course, but another place where the city seems to be challenged is with the commercial building permit process, which takes years. Long lead times, drives up the costs, and contributes to making the cost of living higher in the city. What hope do we have the permitting process will be improved?
Yes, thank you. And I see that happening as well. I know a business owner who's been waiting 2 years for a permit, lost their investors, was not able to open. And so it's tough when you are not able to get these things timely. Hard and soft costs go up by 30% every 2 years. And it's unfortunate, especially for a small business owner who's just trying to, you know, start their passion, start their dream and do what they love. And so, yes, that was something that was really important to me. And was just talking to SDCI, trying to learn about the permit process. How do we speed that up? The city auditor did a report on things that could be improved within SDCI to improve the permitting process. And so I took a look at that report and planning to set some time with Director Torgelson to talk about it, because it's not just, it's small businesses, it's also housing, it's also, the permitting process is unfortunately taking too long and too cumbersome. And so how do we streamline that process, especially with design review, so that our small businesses could get started right away? This time is money.
So it's on the list then. It's on the to-do list.
It's on the list. We're looking at, yes.
Okay. And in terms of the these sort of revitalization questions around housing, small business access, closed storefronts and things, are there particular sectors of the economy that could benefit from the kind of public-private partnerships we're seeing on a grand scale along the waterfront and on smaller scale in other parts of the city? I mean, where would the help be most effectively used to boost the kind of things we're talking about to then help all the other things that we're trying to address fall into place, whether, you know, in terms of reactivating more space, getting more people downtown, making it easier to live downtown, making people feel safer and actually be safer downtown?
I'm biased.
What's that? Go ahead.
As chair of arts and culture, I will always say arts and culture would love to see a renaissance of our theater groups, bringing kids down to arts and culture areas at King Street Station. And, you know, we have the historic theater district in downtown. We'd love to uplift and revitalize that area. Hearing from many theater and arts groups that their patrons are afraid to come to downtown. They don't feel safe, but yet these are major benefactors for large and small arts organization. And so working with these organizations, like what are they hoping for? They gave me a list of 4 things from easiest to hardest. And so we're trying to do the easier things before hitting the hard things, which also include looking at banners regarding the historic theater district. And also, you know, officers are around during games. They would love to see that for art events as well. And so looking to see how we can help with some of their suggested ideas, and especially continue that conversation, that dialogue, and how do we leverage and uplift our arts and culture community? Because I think it kind of is the intersectionality between all things. How do we involve our youth, especially on 3rd, Pike and Pine, hearing from people who live there, neighbors there, would love to see arts organizations in these empty storefronts, because they believe that will bring more foot traffic, that will allow that area to be a healing space for people to not so the area is more inviting. It feels more like home versus an industrial downtown area. So how do we look at the built environment to really promote these things. But I'm sure I'm sure Maritza and Councilmember Rivera and Councilmember Hollingsworth have other ideas as well.
The first thing I'll say to Councilmember Wu's point, we have to be a city for young families. Young families, and it has to be free or low cost. It can't be where family of four spending $200-300 to go to an event. That's just not affordable. So whatever we do, the public-private partnership has to really center around young families and kids. I think that's going to really drive. A society cannot survive without young people. The second thing that we need to do a better job of, and we will, is our Pike Pine core. And if you go from the waterfront, think about this. You go from the waterfront, you go to Pike Place, you know, the beautiful waterfront that we have and the overpass, and then you go to Pike Place, boom. And then you go from Pike Place Market to Westlake, and it's kind of sketch. It's not kind of sketch, it is, right? And then from there, you're going up past Nordstrom's, our flagship store, beautiful. And then you're heading up, you have Pacific Place, and then you hit the convention center, and then you hit the theater. But then we have SDOT doing construction, and I would like us to, and we have to talk to, you know, we're talking to SDOT and, you know, planning different things. But from the convention center into Capitol Hill, we have to make that bridge and that connection. Right now, it's like, okay, is that a freeway? Should I walk over it? I don't really know. We need flags. It needs to be inviting so people are flowing in and out of District 3 and District 7 for this consistent flow of traffic and accessibility for either or. And I think if we pay attention to our Pike Pine, I think it's going to spill out downtown as we can continue to grow this piece. But I think right now, we've done a great job of investing in pockets, and we need to continue to do the connectivity piece, which I think is going to be huge. And so I think with the public-private partnership, it's going to figure out how we can do more events that are accessible and free for young families to draw those people downtown. And to be honest with you, I think we should have free parking downtown. I know we want, I'm gonna just say it. Okay, I'm just saying, or longer
I
parking
heard a
time.
cheer roar went up over Zoom. Everyone, even though we can't hear the audio, I felt a roar of cheer go up over the Zoom feed. Continue.
I'm just saying, when you talk to a lot of small businesses, particularly in Capitol Hill, they have lost a ton of customers to the east side. They used to have east side people come into downtown, but it's hard to park. It's, you know, and I know there's transportation. There's we want people to take the bus and trains and, you know, these things. But there's also people that come from the east side into downtown to want to experience a lot of these things. And so if we have free parking, if we make it accessible, or maybe it's 4 hours, 6 hours, I don't care, but something longer, I think it would make it more attractive for people to come. And we continue to make these investment in transit as well.
We've got a few minutes left here. One thing I want to say, it sounded like you were advocating there a moment for the lid over I-5 that's been talked about for the last 50 or 60 years. Is that, and that's a topic for another day, but I heard you talking about connecting Pike Pine and making it more seamless.
I like the lid.
That's the lid.
Felix,
okay.
I like the lid. Other people might not, but we have a lid over Judkins, and we also, Mercer Island has a lid.
Yeah.
Everybody, we got lids. Okay.
Yeah, we got
put a cap
lids
on it.
Felix, can I say something about the downtown and empty storefronts and this piece? I mean, what I would add to what my colleagues have articulated is just, I would like to hear, everyone knows Office of Economic Development has the Seattle Restored program to try to address the empty storefronts with a combination of arts and other types of activations. I'd love to hear from the businesses at DSA and broadly, what is it going to take to repopulate those empty storefronts permanently? Not just, we're doing this as sort of a gap measure, is it, I hate that I see so many small businesses downtown closing. I walk around downtown a lot, like on the weekends, and I'm a downtown person because I'm a urban kid. That's how I grew up. So, what's it going to take? I would love to hear more about how we can partner together. And then I'm going to real talk. everyone knows we have this $250 million deficit. And so our ability to do things, to put more financial investments, is going to be limited. And so where do we prioritize the dollars? And then also, are there some things that we can do that are no cost, but that could help, from a policy perspective, that would help folks get into these empty storefronts permanently? I know this is why I feel so passionately about bringing people back downtown, because I think that, and I have heard there's a correlation, like if we don't have enough people downtown, and I talked to some of the small businesses downtown who have closed even temporarily because there just aren't folks coming in. And so I'd love to hear from your membership, like what would help. So I'm open to having those conversations.
Yeah, I think people would be eager to share their thoughts on that. Now, I have a kind of a mechanical kind of update question I want to ask here, and then a bigger question that might end up being our final thought question for the hour here. This was someone in the audience is asking about when DCI and the city was looking into conversion of older office buildings to apartments. This was a few months ago, and then it said, and then the project went silent. And the question is update. Oh, first of all, there's lots of comments where people say free parking, yay! So the free parking thing, that's going to be the big takeaway from this meeting, is that Councilmember Hollingsworth is calling for free parking on all of Capitol Hill. It hasn't happened yet though, so don't go rush out there. But so this notion of these conversion of office buildings to apartments, does anybody know what the latest is on that, and can you share anything about that? Don't know the updates on that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but last we heard that the mayor was listing ideas on how to do it efficiently. It's expensive. It's going to cost a lot to gut these buildings, to put in plumbing and the infrastructure needs to become housing. But I believe it's people. Yeah.
My understanding is that they did this, they did the Office of Planning and Community Development did this call for plans, like a competition almost. I think some buildings have been identified, very few are actually buildings that could, and we're so lucky because Councilmember Wu knows a lot about this, having done the Louisa Hotel, and she's just such a great source of information on this front. But I have heard that there are some buildings that have been identified, and so the next steps are, what are the next steps to get there? As with all things, anything land use takes a really long time, and so I think they're in the process
especially the permit. No,
well, and we're trying to address that too.
All right, we're almost out of time here. It's a good time to ask this. This is a question from the audience, which is perfect, I think, for wrapping up on. I'll give you each a couple 90 seconds, let's say, to answer this question, so I have a minute or two to wrap things up at the end. And this is, what do you need businesses, community leaders, philanthropy, etc., to do in support of downtown that is new or different? What a great question. I love the audience. Thanks for all the great, thoughtful questions. We didn't get to all of them. We didn't cover some of the stuff we've covered in the past, but I really appreciate the thoughtful questions. This is always with these DSA audiences, people really care and are really articulate, take the time to express their questions. And this is a brilliant question. So what do you need people to do that's new or different to support downtown? And let's have Councilmember Wu, why don't you go first?
Oh, new and different. Oh gosh. Okay. I would love to see, well, this is our downtown. This is ownership of our downtown. I know it's not new or different, but like we always talk about how much we love downtown and what can we do to contribute to the revitalization, and that's just being present, being there, visiting the businesses, the restaurants, make it a day, go shopping, eat, see a show. I remember GameWorks spending lots of time there. And so just being, I think, appreciative of everything that downtown has done for us and for our lives. It's not new, but I think that's good.
That's heartfelt. That's why what Councilmember Hollingsworth was saying about being at the Bon Marché with her grandma. I have memories like that, going back to the 1970s of downtown Seattle, and I take my daughter there now, and it's sort of, it's just something you do because it's the downtown's the heart and the soul of this entire region, and it's like it gets taken for granted, by people who don't come in very often or who sort of get these misperceptions based on media or just other reasons. But no, I think that's spot on. How about you, Councilmember Rivera? You got about? I give you about a minute for your answer. 45 seconds, actually. 45 seconds. I used up some of your time. Sorry, gentlewoman from District 4. I used up some of your time. I yield.
I'll keep it short. I would love to find ways to convince at least folks in my district, and not just families, but young people, to come downtown and enjoy all the amenities. So some kind of return to downtown to enjoy downtown campaign would be something I would love to see. That is a bit, it would be a little new and different because I just haven't seen that.
All right. Councilmember Hollingsworth, give you the last word on this topic.
Yeah, we need to bring back our Sonics. So if someone from just straight up, can we bring our Sonics back? My uncle
got all the
plays
applause
Sonics.
lines today. I have to say that's very skillful of you.
Bring back our Sonics. Here's the second thing. I'll tell this really quick story. Back in the 70s, my grandma was working at Head Start. She had this program for families and kids, and they were trying to raise money to be able to do some more programming free for kids. So they sold tickets and whatnot. And instead of having the dinner in the Central District, she partnered with the Chamber of Commerce so she could actually bring kids downtown who, would not necessarily have that opportunity. If we had more stuff like that, and I know a lot of businesses do that, but bringing a school downtown, showing them something cool that they didn't know about, in organization, nonprofit, whatever it is, having access to certain things that they might not had seen. The first time I was able to see the Amazon glass, I can't even remember what it's called, with all the plants.
The spheres.
The spheres. The
Yes.
only thing is I said they didn't have a cannabis plant, and that's the one thing I can donate to Amazon, but that they did not, that was the first time I was there. Like, just this continuing interactivity of being integrated with our community is what's going to help. But bringing back the Sonics, I think will be great, and outdoor spaces.
All right. And my late mother-in-law was a Head Start teacher in Seattle for about 25 years. I said Head Start Seattle was a fabulous program. All right. I want to thank our panelists, Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth, Councilmember Maritza Rivera, and Councilmember Tanya Wu. Also, thanks to Jared Axelrod and Amazon for their support of the series. I want to thank all of our audience for joining us today and all your terrific questions for these DSA virtual access programs. Thank you, as always, to the fabulous DSA staff. Do mark your calendar for the next installment of DSA Virtual Access, which will be Thursday, June 20th. Watch your inbox for more information on that. Until then, I'm Felix Bonnell on behalf of DSA. Thanks again for joining us this morning, and we will see you downtown.